Today we're going to talk about transfers. In other words, how to transition safely from one sitting surface to another correctly. Now, if you're new to this channel, I'm Tara. I'm a neurologic physical therapist. And on this channel, we talk about anything and everything related to neurologic conditions to empower you with the necessary tools, which will, without a doubt, help you regain control of your life, improve your overall quality of life, and help you to achieve your movement-related goals. And all that being said, as I mentioned, today I'm going to teach you how to transfer safely from one sitting surface to another correctly. Now, I know there's a whole variety of different techniques that you all use to help you to be safe and prevent you from falling, which is everyone's ultimate goal. But in the process of being safe, a lot of times we develop some bad habits. So whether you are early in the rehab and you're learning how to transfer for the first time, or you're later in your rehab and maybe you're not doing it with the best technique, hopefully today the progression that I'm going to go through will help you to maybe go back to the foundation a little bit, build a better foundation so that you can get the most out of your transfer, because a transfer really is a critical foundational skill that really does help you with walking and standing, and it's something that you do multiple times a day. So it's kind of like a necessary movement. But the double bonus is that you also could, if you do it correctly, be contributing to your balance and your walking. So first, let's talk about some of the most common transfer techniques that most people develop. If you have ataxia, and I recently just saw this, so that's why it's fresh in my mind, there's a couple of strategies that I've found that people with ataxia usually resort to. So there's the forward method where you just kind of dive straight forward. So maybe you're sitting in your chair and you point it straight towards your bed or the couch, and then you do kind of a 180 to get to that sitting surface. Or you opt for the full 360. So maybe you enter or approach the sitting surface you want to go to from the side, but instead of taking the shortest route, you kind of take the long route and go all the way around. And I really think that's so that you can keep both hands on the surface you're transferring to. Now, if you had a stroke, and we are guilty of this, I put the onus on us as therapists because we want you to be safe. In most cases, you probably just always transfer towards your strong side. But then that leaves the question, how do you get out of bed once you've transferred into bed if you go towards your strong side? Yeah, that usually becomes a problem that we don't often address. What we usually do is just train someone to move your wheelchair to the other side or face it in the other direction so you can transfer out to your strong side. Not really ideal, especially if you want to be independent with getting into bed and out of bed. You don't want to have to rely on someone to have to move your chair to the other side. So that is the most common strategy, is just always transferring to your strong side. And as I said, we teach you that because we want you to be safe. So I don't recommend anyone start this process unless you are working with a therapist, but it is critical to be able to transfer to both sides. Then you're not going to get any anxiety of going to a new person's house or going into a theater or anything like that with that anxiety of not really knowing which way the room is going to be set up. You will feel comfortable transferring to both sides, so it really won't be an issue. And then I have also seen the full 360 technique a lot with people that have suffered a stroke as well. Safe, but if you want to use it as a foundational skill to make your standing better and your walking better, then you're missing an opportunity by using this 360 technique. If you use that technique, I also think you'll get a lot out of this video. So hopefully you'll continue to watch. But yes, those are the most common abnormal strategies that we're going to try and undo today. But regardless of whether you use some of those strategies or you're very new in your rehab or early in your rehab and you just don't know how to transfer yet, even better, because you're going to start with a good foundation so that you're going to do it correctly from this point forward, which is ultimately going to carry over into your standing and your walking. So let's go through this step by step. First of all, it is about setup. As I mentioned, some of you just point your wheelchair face on. The first step in the early stages or when relearning a correct technique, always have your wheelchair or the surface that you're sitting on very close to the surface that you're going to. If not, you're undoubtedly going to use some compensatory strategies. Our brains are very smart, whether we want them to be or not, and your brain wants you to stay safe. So compensatory strategies are most likely just going to kick in. So early on, or relearning a good technique or relearning how to go towards your involved side, have that surface very close. And then we're just going to work on slide board transfers. I will put a link for a slide board in the description below. I highly recommend this technique. We're not even going to stand at the beginning. We're just going to learn how to scoot across a board correctly so that it is a good foundation to build on the next step. So yes, a lot of times we use slide boards, but then either someone drags you across the slide board or it's just kind of sits there and you kind of hop over the top of it, but you don't really use it to slide on. Today we're going to learn how to slide on a slide board. So towards your involved side, best case scenario, you know, sit on the board. Don't curl your fingers under the board. You want your fingers on top of the board, or even better, you want your fingers on your thighs, and you're going to do little tiny scoots. So little. You don't want to go over in one shot. Most people, they don't want to take the time to do this, but little scoots. What you're teaching yourself when you do these scoots is you're teaching yourself how to get the right amount of forward lean, which will be really important when you do a stand pivot transfer, and you're learning, hopefully, how to push down through both feet. So little scoots across the board. And then every time you scoot, you forward lean, try and push down through both legs, lift, and hopefully land a couple inches further down the board. Repeat that again. Forward lean, lift, move a little bit more, forward lean, lift, scoot a little bit more, forward lean, lift, scoot a little bit more. Now, this is not about just getting across the board. It's about training your body with a good solid foundation for a stand pivot transfer. So although it takes a long time, I highly suggest you use a slide board to do this. If you don't use a slide board, you're going to go in one shot and most likely compensate by just pushing with your strong leg. Or if you have ataxia, you're most likely just going to brace your legs on the chair to get your butt up high enough so that you clear that little tiny gap between the chair and the bed or the couch or the other chair that you're moving to. Now, one tip I highly recommend is strapping your legs together, especially if you have some strong compensatory strategies and a tendency to just push with your strong leg. Highly recommend that you strap your legs together. That'll help you to hopefully just push a little bit more evenly through both legs. The other modification I make a lot, especially if you can't really get that forward lean, is put a chair in front of you to start and put your hands on the chair. If you guys watched my sit to stand video, it's a very similar technique that I used for sit to stand. So you can see the carryover here. It's going to teach you how to be able to stand up from a chair, stand and walk. So very important. And it's something you do multiple times a day. That is the transfer. So it's opportunities to practice good technique multiple times a day. One thing I forgot to mention, if you are really early on in your rehab and going across a bridge like this is just super scary right now and your sitting balance is poor, you can practice this just scooting along your bed. You're going to still get that good technique, but you're going to start laying that foundation to eventually be able to do a scooting transfer across a slide board. And I would do this multiple times. I would just set this up and just go back and forth, multiple times. Remember, repetition. And now we're going to go right into a stand pivot transfer. If you still have trouble getting all the way to standing, I have a whole video on sit to stands. I highly recommend that video. I'm not going to go through that entire breakdown, but if you still are having trouble getting to standing, before you even consider doing a stand pivot transfer, I would really isolate or just focus on those sit to stands. as a separate activity and still use the scooting transfer as your transfer technique. So you can work on both, but maybe just not do the stand pivot transfer so that you can get really good at a sit to stand without using compensation strategies. And now we're going to move on to stand pivot transfers. So if you want to learn how to do this correctly, I recommend you practice this like not in a situation where you would normally do a stand pivot transfer, because you're not going to have the right boundaries or stabilizing surfaces around you to do this. But I do recommend that you get in a very small space, not giving your body a whole lot of room to sway or get off balance, which is usually makes people a little bit fearful. And then again, you resort to some compensatory strategies. But I like using a wall, having walls or getting in a corner so that you've got lots of stable surfaces around you. You can also use a corner in a kitchen countertop, and you're just going to work on stand and then a step pivot back and sit, stand, step pivot back and sit multiple times. Remember, we're trying to undo compensatory strategies if you are compensating. And if you're learning this for the first time, you don't want to develop any compensatory strategies. So having lots of safety structures around you is extremely, extremely helpful. And then from here, you can just practice removing some of those stabilizing structures one at a time. Go slow, maybe go to just one wall, and then maybe having like a piece of furniture on one side of you that offers you something that you could touch, but not necessarily something that you can lean on. And then once you get good at that, you can move on to actually doing this in a real life scenario. So either transferring onto a bed, a couch, or another chair. Highly recommend you leave couches to last because they're usually a little bit lower, so they are harder to do a sit to stand from. But to another chair or to your bed. Now just putting a chair in front of you a little bit for stabilization, but also so that you can get a nice step. Now, this is not a pre-gait activity, but I do have a lot of videos on how to load your involved leg, which again, just like doing the sit to stands in isolation before you do a sit to stand pivot transfer, before you do the pivot step, really work on a lot of the pre-gait activities, getting comfortable loading that leg and then putting it all together. So now doing that transfer in a real life scenario, but have that chair in front of you so that as you load that leg, you do have something as a backup for safety so that you won't compensate and you really will feel confident to try and load that leg. And then here's my final suggestion, which is a great opportunity to make this automatic. Remember, learning always starts with a lot of thinking, but the goal is always to get a movement, acquiring a movement to a point where it's automatic. Now is where you just get the repetitions in. Good quality movement. I know they say perfection is overrated and that it's not about perfection, but in this case, perfection matters. So do it over and over and over again. And before any of you ask how many times a day should you do this, how badly do you want to learn how to do this activity and have it be automatic? That's your answer. But learning is all about getting the repetitions in. I know it's boring. I know it is not how you want to be spending your day. And I know that you'd rather be at a gym and doing a lot of kind of higher level activities, but truly, truly learning a movement takes doing these little monotonous, sometimes what you might consider easy activities over and over and over again. And so when you get in this position and you have a good quality movement, I wouldn't just do it once. Every time you need to transfer, I would do 10 or 15 every single time, back and forth, especially if you're someone that always transfers to your good side. Now, if you're doing this for the first time and you've only been transferring to your good side for a really long time, do not do this without help. But with help, definitely do about 10 of these every time without moving the chair to the other side. Now, one other thing I forgot to mention, most wheelchairs, the armrests come off. So you can transfer from a wheelchair to a bed with a slide board. So if you don't know how to do that, There should be a phone number on your wheelchair somewhere from the company that your insurance either rented it from or where it was purchased from. So call that number. They can teach you how to take that armrest off to lay that good foundation of a slide board transfer. And then that is it for this video. If you're new to this channel and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on that notification bell so that you will get notified every time I upload new videos. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.